everybody, this is Mike with On Point Preparedness. In part 2 of the Escape and Evasion series, I wanted to show how you get out of handcuffs and some other types of restraints. This isn't going to be an all-inclusive list of all the different types of restraints that can be used against you and how to get out of them, but it's definitely going to get you thinking about things. So to start, just basic standard handcuffs. These aren't high security handcuffs. Just want to show you a little bit about how they work. They have a primary lock that generally has universal keys. And when you turn the key counterclockwise, that's actually going to release the actual handcuff locking mechanism. But you'll see what I'm pointing to right there. It's actually called a secondary lock. The secondary lock is engaged by using the pointy end of the handcuff key. You just insert it into that hole and then you'll move it either left or right to engage it. The purpose of the secondary lock is to prevent the handcuff from tightening inwards, whereas the primary lock prevents the handcuff from opening outwards. Now, the purpose of the secondary lock is, one, it prevents the handcuff from tightening too much on the person that's being restrained, but also it helps to prevent shims from being used on this handcuff, which I'll demonstrate later. But how you basically get rid of the secondary lock is you still insert the key as I've shown, and instead of rotating the key counterclockwise, you just simply rotate it clockwise first and then counterclockwise to disengage it. Now, talking about handcuff keys, the easiest way to open up a handcuff would be to have a key. So you can see here on my belt, I have a lot of these spare universal handcuff keys. So this one's at the front of my belt. And these are really cheap, inexpensive. They generally work across most handcuff manufacturers. And I put that one right in there, and you could probably find some ways to hide that on your person. The problem is it has to be fairly permanent because as I've experimented with other handcuff keys like this one, the tick, you tend to lose them. Now this tick key is an amazing key. Now it's only the primary key. It doesn't have a key for the secondary lock, but remember, you only need that opposite end or the pointy end of the key to engage the secondary lock. To disengage the secondary lock and the primary lock, you're using that primary end of the key. Now, the only problem I've found with the tick key is that it's so small, and typically you're going to be changing pants and things like that you lose these. And I've actually lost all of mine. I think I had 2 or 3 and I need to buy some more. But it is an excellent, inconspicuous way to hide a handcuff key. And you can see in this photograph here just how low profile it is. So that's another option versus buying a whole bunch of standard metal keys. Now, before I move on to the next subject, I do want to mention that this is one of those things where you can't just store a key on your backside or on the front of your belt and just think you're going to be able to disengage handcuffs. This is one of those things where you really need to practice, especially if your hands are handcuffed behind your back. It's an entirely different atmosphere trying to feel around behind your back and not be able to see what's going on and still manage to put the key in the right place and turn it the right way. So you really need to buy yourself a set of handcuffs and just try to practice at home. Just make sure you don't lock yourself up and need to call for an ambulance or something. Now, moving on to shims, this is an excellent clear-cut diagram of how shims work. You can see the opposing teeth of the handcuff, which is the locking mechanism. A shim is basically the same as shims or credit cards that used to be used on old doors, where you'd slip this piece of plastic or metal in between the locking mechanism and open it up. You can see this very thin piece of metal is slipped in between the teeth, therefore the teeth can move freely. Now I've got one of these Ready-Man wallet-sized cards with lockpick sets in them. It's got a shim, it's got a small saw, and it's got another device in there to basically disengage cheap Chinese padlocks. But just want to show you how this shim works. Again, so just put the handcuff on myself and you just slip it right in that hole where the 2 opposing teeth engage. And you're just going to push hard down into that. Now, when you try this, it actually doesn't slip in between the teeth easily. There's not a whole lot of room in there. And so what a lot of people find is, in addition to pushing the shim inward, the movable part of the handcuff that's around my wrist, you actually need to push that in towards your wrist so that there's a little bit of give so that this shim can slip in between the teeth. And so there, you probably couldn't see it too well, but I had to push that handcuff, the mobile piece of the handcuff, in just so that shim would slip in between the teeth. Now remember I talked about the secondary lock. Now if that secondary lock is engaged, that mobile piece of the handcuff that has the opposing teeth, it's not going to move inward. And so I wouldn't say it's impossible to get a shim in there, but it is extremely difficult. With at least some of the tools I've used, I haven't been able to get it in between those teeth without entirely mangling the tool. Now the last thing I wanted to show you is just another way to conceal some tools for escape and evasion. The quarter is there just for size reference, but what you've got is a ceramic blade, you've got a key for handcuffs, and you've got Kevlar rope, and it's all going to be tucked into a 700cc bicycle inner tube. And what you'll do is you'll slip this inner tube along with all those tools around one of your watches, and it is very inconspicuous. You can see here that it's very low profile and hardly anyone would see it. Now some uses for these tools, obviously the ceramic blade, you can cut through things. If your hands are tied with duct tape, if they're tied with zip ties, you can obviously cut through those. Although there are other ways to defeat duct tape and zip ties simply by maneuver using your hands and thrusting them against your lap or your waist or your back. I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video, but it's something that you can look up on YouTube and see. It's very easy. The other tools here, we've covered the handcuff key, but lastly, the Kevlar rope. So exactly what is that about? So you'll see that this Kevlar rope, you want to size it according to, I don't know, maybe about 2 feet. And you're going to put loops on either end. And what you're going to do is put one of those loops on each of your feet, and then the middle section will go through whatever you want to cut, whether that's duct tape, whether that is some zip ties, some heavy duty zip ties like you're seeing in this video. And you're just going to rock back and forth, and that Kevlar rope, which is really strong, is going to act like a saw. And you see here, this individual was able to just cut through these military or police style zip tie handcuffs, which are very thick zip ties, and you really can't defeat those by thrusting them against your waist. So I hope part 2 was helpful in terms of escape and evasion ideas. In part 3, I'm going to be going over some things that you may want to pack in your bug out bag, so that when you encounter things like razor wire or barbed wire or padlocks, you'll have some tools necessary. Until the next one, see you guys.